तू.
Sir, live, we are live now.
Good evening, everyone. And I, Dr. Jitendra Patel, President of Indian Society of Anesthesiologists, Ahmedabad City Branch. Welcome you all. At the same time, all the faculties and moderator and our special guest, special faculty, Honorary Secretary General of Indian Society of Anesthesiologists, Headquarter, Dr. Naveen Malhotra, in this webinar. I welcome as a faculty to Dr. Manisha Kapdi, who is Associate Professor of Anesthesiologist in SVP Hospital, Dr. Siddharth Parmar, who is Assistant Professor of Anesthesiologist at BJ Medical College Civil Hospital. Along with them, we are having Dr. Keyur Sheth, who is Consultant Anesthesiologist at Ahmedabad, Dr. Rushi Mishra, who is also Consultant Anesthesiologist, and Dr. Ridhesh Panchal, who is also Consultant Anesthesiologist and practicing as a freelance practitioner for last more than 15 years in the city of Ahmedabad. I welcome you all. I welcome all the faculties.
Thank
and
you,
now,
sir.
I request our Chief Moderator, Dr. Rasesh Diwan, to conduct the webinar. Dr. Rasesh, please.
Jitendra, thank you so much. I feel proud to be with ISA's very important meeting on COVID fear and confusion we all have. And thank you so much for invited me to conduct this webinar. I'm thankful for those young faculties we have today. Among the fleet, we have two people who are really working with the COVID patients, one in the SVP hospital and second with the civil hospital. So we are fortunate to have two very well experienced persons with us and two young buddy faculties from private practitioner, Dr. Ridhesh and Dr. Rushi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
We are going to have Dr. Naveen Malhotra. He is the National Secretary of Indian Society of Anesthesiology, joining soon. And he has conducted so many webinars by now, national as well as international, and even with the Indian Medical Association. So he has really mastered. He's involved in the administration area. He's also involved in the management of the patient, as well as he's involved in education. So the moment he joins, we'll have wonderful final words from him today. But we are waiting for him to join, but we'll start with our project. I will have to ask Dr. Siddharth. You're an opening batsman. Please join.
Okay, sir.
Dr. Siddharth, I know you are working so hard with the civil hospital, COVID ICU, COVID hospital. And you are in quarantine right now, I came to know, because it's official, you have to quarantine after you finish the duties for some days. You work all 7 days. So now, I want the actual fact from you, Siddharth. Put Siddharth on the screen. What is your experience of treating COVID patients? What kind of presentations they come with? When they become hypoxic? What is the criteria for shifting them to intensive care units? When do you intubate these patients? Which factors decide and lead to the death? So these are the questions I've framed for you. So over to Siddharth.
Rasesh, sir.
Yes.
My experience in treating COVID-19 patient in ICU is that the commonest presentation which I found is shortness of breath, fever, sore throat, myalgia. Many times patient comes with diarrhea and nausea, vomiting also. Many times patient is having unstable hemodynamic and they present as a COVID suspected case. Nowadays, altered sensorium and even intubated in EM department, they come as a COVID positive patients. Few of them, they have acute on chronic conditions, which I commonly found in my ICU is that COPD exacerbations, DKA cases, obesity, operated CAVG cases. We have also found many carditis and cardiac failure cases. So many times I found acute on chronic conditions. Now the criteria to shift the patient in ICU is that whenever there is a saturation, SpO2 value is less than 90, or patient is having respiratory distress or the respiratory rate high, or patient is having multiple comorbidity or the unstable hemodynamic, and then these are the criteria in which we mostly shift patient to ICU. Many times patient come with altered sensorium or the decay or the chest pain, they are also admitted in ICU. Now the
Siddharth, the
initially
question is,
Huh.
SpO2 90 means with oxygen 90? You are giving 10, 12 liters of oxygen and then it goes below 90, you shift to ICU. That's
No. If there is any requirement of oxygen, nowadays we shift when the SpO2
Okay.
values is less than 90.
Okay, without oxygen.
Yes, and mostly
ahead.
they are if they are with comorbidity, then also we will shift the patients.
Okay.
Now the first criteria is that we commonly use non-rebreathing mask, and then high frequency nasal cannula. And whenever after using this two regimen, if still there is a SpO2 is less than 90 and patient is having compromised respiratory system and low PaO2 value or the altered sensorium or the unstable hemodynamic, then we will intubate these cases. And see, the factors which leading mortality in my experience is that high D dimer value, high LDH and high ferritin value, multiple comorbidity, that is mostly the geriatric cases or like cardiac failure, MI, immunocompromised status, or we can say late or bad presentation at the time of ICU admission.
Right.
These cases are actually having higher morbidity and mortality.
We are coming to the comorbid conditions later on.
Okay.
So let us go with your management first.
Okay, and my observation in my experience is that hypoxemia and comorbidity is a major factor, and the COVID patient mostly tolerate hypoxemia very well in compared to the normal individual. Airway pressure are not raised in COVID patient in contrast to the swine flu patients. Prone position is very helpful, and high flow nasal cannula has a promising response in management of the COVID-19 patient. Prone position and high flow nasal cannula can delay the intubation, and patient on ventilator, they actually carry a high rate of morbidity and mortality. This is what my observation. In my experience, we have provided an anesthesia for lower limb amputation and burst abdomens, and 2 suspected CS cases. All these cases had been operated under spinal anesthesia only. So this is what my experience during my 7-day posting in COVID-19 ICU posting.
Thank you, Siddharth. So I understand how experienced you are about the COVID patients who are really high risk and who require ICU. So I'm sure you have a wonderful method taken over in the civil hospital. I would like to invite now Dr. Manisha Ben. I'll get back to you, Siddharth, soon after some time.
Yes.
Manisha Ben, are you online?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I'm online from my husband's computer.
No problem.
From house, sir.
No problem. Thank you so much for joining. And
Yes.
what I would you like to add anything to what the management Siddharth said, because you are also handling a lot of ICU cases, and you are also involved with the surgeries and anesthesia for COVID patients and they come for emergencies. So I'd like to ask you about certain things to you. Would you first add anything to what Siddharth said, or straight away go for your question?
I agree with Siddharth. We have also patients with comorbidities like myocardial disease, hepatitis, acute kidney injury, sepsis, major electrolyte disturbances, major metabolic disturbances, respiratory acidosis, metabolic acidosis, then type 1 and type 2 respiratory failure, hypercoagulable state they have, and multiple organ dysfunction they have. We are also facing this type of patients, and half of the patients have comorbidities like geriatric patient, they have with diabetes, hypertension, IST. These are the patient scenario we have with. We are tasting the.
Dr. Manisha Men, just hold on. We have now in the fleet a very senior expert person from national body of our Indian Society of Anesthesiology. We welcome Dr. Naveen Malhotra.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir.
Naveen, please.
Good evening, everyone, and
Good evening.
it's a pleasure to join this academic program hosted by ISA Gujarat State Branch and ISA Ahmedabad City Branch. And I congratulate the organizing committee of this academic program. As a National Secretary, I feel very happy that the ISA National Task Force we have set up for COVID-19 is working nicely. And as a part of that task force activities involves teaching and training. So such an activities are going on in different states, and I feel very happy to join this academic program, a practically based academic program of ISA Ahmedabad and Gujarat branch. Please let the academics flow.
Thank you so much, Naveen, for joining us with a very short notice. And let me tell the viewers and the audience that he is the one who is involved not only in education at a national and international level with the Indian Medical Association also, and he is also involved in the management of COVID patients as well as in deciding the policies and administrative policies and everything. Thank you so much, Naveen, for sharing your time, and I'm sure we'll utilize your expertise very well. It will be very beneficial to the people who are attending this webinar. Manisha, please go ahead with your what you are going on. You're talking about the comorbid conditions which you come across in your ICUs.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Apart from COVID testing, we are also sending the test for procalcitonin, that is a marker of sepsis, and the other markers of cytokine storm for ARDS like C-reactive protein, NT-proBNP, LDH, and ESR. Interleukin 6 test is not with us, but otherwise all tests we are doing for the patients with COVID positive. Ours is a COVID center in the Ahmedabad, one of the main COVID centers in the Ahmedabad.
Thank you, Manisha Men. Now, up till now, we understood the magnitude of the problem with COVID in our own city of Ahmedabad with two experts from two centers, one from civil hospital and one from SVP hospital. The agenda and the aim for today's webinar is more related to the private practice in Ahmedabad, and there are so many private practitioners on the line watching us on this webinar. So now we'll concentrate more. We have understood the magnitude and the problems. Both of you faculty, we are very much thankful to you for sharing your experiences. We're going to involve you in between also while the discussion is going on with the private practitioners. Thank you so much. Now, coming to the practice, there's a lot of fear, a lot of confusion, a lot of things going on in the mind, whether we should do elective procedures, whether we should do only emergency procedure and restrict the elective procedures. When do you call it an emergency? How to test, those many things, then the equipments and our anesthesia workstation, the operation theater, every single point, small details, our colleagues have suggested us to ask the questions which we have listed, and I'm sure our faculties will be able to answer all these questions to all of you. So I start with Ridesh. Put Ridesh on unmute him. Ridesh, unmute. Ridesh, you can unmute yourself also.
Yes.
Yes. So first question I would like to know, there's a lot of fear about carrying out surgeries and there are so many protocols to follow for a surgery. So whether we should not load ourselves and restrict the elective procedures till the era is over, the COVID time is over, and we replan them after a month or whenever it happens. It may be 2nd May, it may be 15th May, it may be 1st June. So shall we wait and hold them for elective procedures, or what do you think?
Yeah, you are absolutely right, sir. We must hold the elective procedure in the COVID-19 pandemic. The main reason is very out of the scope reason or the national reason that we must conserve the hospital beds for the worst come worst scenario, that the hospital bed will be short and fall due to the rise in the patient. So first thing is that we must restrict the elective surgeries, and second reason is to prevent the unnecessary exposure of the healthcare worker to the asymptomatic COVID patient, which is as infectious as the COVID patient. So we may have to conduct sometimes semi-emergency surgeries like the cancer surgeries or the neurosurgeries with space-occupying lesion and the vision in losing and like that. And but we must follow the enhanced recovery protocol for that patients also, and we must discharge that patient early also. And for emergency surgeries, we have got no option but say yes, like cesarean section, acute cholecystitis, acute appendicitis, trauma, and like that. So we must restrict the elective surgeries to conserve the hospital bed and to avoid the unnecessary exposure of the health worker to the asymptomatic COVID patient.
Correct. I take your word. Rushi, do you want to change or you agree with this?
Sir, my addition is only that, as Dr. Ridesh has told, that everything is based on the occupancy of the hospital bed and unnecessary exposure of the asymptomatic COVID patients to other patient as well as the healthcare worker. If you select the semi-elective or semi-emergency procedure, please make a note that what are the magnitude of surgical and anesthesia intervention which required in that case.
Correct.
So according to that, you can plan a proper outline to perform that kind of semi-emergency and semi-elective procedures, which
Correct.
should be done in
With pre-plan, very well planned.
With well planned.
So you
only
agree
that-
with
and the surgeries which required a less hospital stay will be entitled for these semi-elective or kind of semi-emergency surgeries. If you say around cholecystectomy, acute cholecystitis, you can discharge the patient in 1.5 days.
Correct.
It will not occupy your hospital bed.
Correct.
Obstructing urinary stone with high creatinine, you can immediately remove the stone and send the patient next day in the morning. So this kind of surgery you should
principle of
consider.
enhanced recovery.
Enhanced
Yes.
recovery. Yes.
Anything to add, Siddharth, Manisha, on elective procedures?
No, sir. I also believe that there should not be any selective routine regular surgeries.
Good, thank you. Manisha, you want to add or
Yes,
I'll go to final
I
verdict to
also agree
Naveen?
with Siddharth. We are
Naveen.
not
Naveen,
in
your
favor
final
of
verdict.
doing elective surgeries.
Good. Naveen, your final verdict on this.
No, not my final wording. As per the central government, and
Correct.
Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, as of now, only emergency and semi-emergency procedures to be done till 3rd May. As per Government of India, elective surgeries as of now should not be done. If somebody is doing it, it's his or her own thing, showing it as semi-emergency or emergency.
Correct.
The procedures which are commonly done across India are emergency cesarean sections or cesarean sections. Acute abdominal conditions like perforation peritonitis, hemoperitoneum, trauma has gone down, and neonatal emergencies, tracheostomies in ICUs, and those cancer surgeries whose staging is going to be affected by delays. So these are the
Correct.
common scenarios being done across the country right now. Yes, semi-emergency and emergency surgeries are allowed.
Due precautions. Thank you so much, Naveen. It was a good support to all of us that there is a government guidelines also over and above the guidelines from our ISA. Thank you so much for opining on this. So we will hold the elective procedures till everything is very clear, and then we'll gradually begin with the proper planning of those cases. Normally we get elective, semi-emergencies and real emergencies, and we will have to cover those real emergencies and semi-emergencies cases. Now you have a semi-emergency kind of thing, like a fracture, which can be done next day, but you can't extend for 2 weeks. Or you have an elective CS plan in this week and something. They are semi-emergencies, which can be done next day also. So Rushi, would you tell me how will you screen this for, see, you are a non-COVID place, you are a small clinic, you are in a small private practice. Freshness Clinic, and you want to screen these cases.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
what is your
So by the time it is obviously evident that we are in a pandemic of COVID patients, those patients who have a suspected symptoms of like flu-like fever, cough, or shortness of breath, or chronic COPD but acute exacerbation. So these patients are easily screened that you have a high degree of suspicious of the COVID positive cases. You can immediately send this patient for a testing and refer to the COVID center. But yes, when there is no such an obvious reasons or no such obvious signs, most of the time patients are asymptomatic. You can study their past history, background, most of the trauma or most of these semi-elective surgeries, like say acute obstruction, trauma case, they are fall right now. The fall in a at a home or like old age people, those who slept in a bathroom or that they have a fractured neck femur. Also, you can easily elaborate the history where they are getting that infection, whether they are coming from hot zone, whether they are coming from the areas where there are a lot of COVID patients, whether they are residing alone or they are accompanied with some other persons, those who are traveling a lot or those who have a travel history. You can easily pick it up. Otherwise, in this kind of situation, you just, if possible, you just go for a COVID screening and then you proceed for this elective semi-emergencies situation. Yes, but in an emergency situation, you consider each and every patient as a COVID positive, take all precaution guidelined by ICMR and national health authorities, and proceed for the surgeries. So this is all what we face in private practice, and we should follow.
Rushi, thank you so much. So majorly you screen by the history, some physical examination, by the habitat they are coming, by the symptoms they have. Like it will first start with the OPD. They take the temperature, they take the history, and from where they are coming, you have to identify from where they are coming with some government ID and all. So you try to suspect that this is a case. When you suspect a case, what would you do?
So after
And say, is
suspecting
a
the
patient
case,
of,
there is there is a basic simple guidelines. If you suspect the patient as a COVID positive, you just make the magnitude of exposure what you are getting if you do these kind of surgeries. You just make a decision according to that. Say it's a fracture patient, say it is a laparotomic case, say it's a procedure which involved intraoperative as well as post-operative many aerolization and exposure to healthcare worker, which is more relevant. Say surgery should be done under regional or general anesthesia, you can plan according to that. So if you suspect this kind of patients and you suspect this COVID positive, take all precautions, take all PPE equipment.
Yes, Rushil, it's okay. Precautions that will come to later on for the PPE and all. But would you get the test done specifically?
Yes. See, sir, right now simple SpO2 monitoring, chest X-ray, and if possible,
objective tests
for HRCT monitoring. These and complete blood count. This will give you a certain idea of like viral infection or not, right? Or otherwise, if you are just semi-elective, you can wait for a day. If possible, go for a COVID testing, which is again is only a 70% specificity in this era of the pandemic. But again, you have a specific, you have a little bit idea regarding your future planning of the surgery as well as the post intraoperative periods and all that. So I recommended, if possible, try to go for COVID. But even COVID positive or COVID negative doesn't make you fear free. Take all the precautions. As this in pandemic, every patient is a COVID positive, whether you are suspecting or not.
Well, Rushi, I have a challenge in this. When you say you diagnose the semi-emergency patient came with a young 50, 60 years old man with fractured tibia, compound injury, you can't wait more than 12, 14, 16 hours or at the most 24 hours. And he is COVID positive, would you refer to the COVID institute where they take care of these emergencies, or would you do in your small clinic?
No, sir. Actually, right now, according to the guideline, there are every COVID positive or suspected COVID positive patient should be operated in a specified COVID hospital,
Correct.
which have a proper guideline and proper protocol which are followed, and there the people are trained. There the healthcare worker are trained for this kind of
Correct.
for handling the COVID patients. In
Agreed.
our small private setup, we are still lacking in educational and other programs for the other healthcare worker as well as other staff to getting educated for this kind of patients to handling in our scenario. So I think it's better to refer this kind of patients to COVID hospital.
Correct. Can I get back to Dr. Manisha Ben?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you elaborate more about the COVID testing, all kinds of tests and their value and how much time they take? So can you elaborate some of the tests which are specific for COVID?
Sir, in our institute, RT-PCR test, antibody test are doing by microbiology department, and test positive or negativity will be achieved within 8 to 12 hours. More than 500 tests they are doing in one day.
Okay. And what is the value of HRCT? There is a lot of discussion going on among private practitioners that we get the HRCT done.
Yes, HRCT, from HRCT we can analyze that the ARDS is
Correct.
Going
It's
on
a
or not.
late test. It's a late test.
Late test, yes.
Siddharth, would you like to add about testing? What else you are doing there?
No, sir. Mostly these are the tests that carried out in Civil Hospital Ahmedabad. No specific.
Would you recommend, all of you, any surgery comes and you want to carry out, say, cesarean elective, which can wait for a couple of days, would you recommend to do a preoperative COVID test?
Sir,
Yes.
as far cesarean section is concerned, I think the law is that every labor patient has to be carried out COVID testing. I think this is what the guideline is there.
Correct.
Besides labor patient or the cesarean patients, rest of the cases are to be carried out for examining or suspecting COVID. If you feel that it's a case for suspicion or the positive,
Then you will get it done.
Then only there is a need of testing.
Say, for example, 60-year-old patient with diabetes and is for cholecystectomy, or you have a 65-year patient for neck tumor who can wait for 24 hours. But would you, as a routine, would you recommend and would you like to do it? Before I come to Dr. Naveen about the regulations and guidelines on this.
Personally saying, I should every patient should be tested for COVID before surgery, because those cases are very less in number. See, nowadays I think 10 or 12 cases are done in civil hospital as a non-COVID patients.
Because
So
all
10
those emergencies have gone down. Basically, the trauma has gone down very much, and people are eating home.
Yes.
Certain emergencies
Yes.
are also less. Dr. Naveen, can I get back to you?
I'm thankful again. Actually, I am, if you can see, I am on another webinar also simultaneously.
Oh, great.
So what I got is that it is about the pre-procedure testing.
Yes.
See, as of now, the tests which are, I'll just be very brief and make some statements. RT-PCR, reverse transcription, RT-PCR test, the reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction test, taken from a properly placed nasal and oropharyngeal swab. Properly placed means you have to put your stick into for 3 to 4 seconds and roll it into the nasopharynx and oropharynx, and then keep it in a cooled VTM, the viral transport media. These tests are reliable. Antibody test has been recently withdrawn from the market.
Yes.
Antibody test has been recently withdrawn. It will re-come again. But if somebody is antibody positive and his RT-PCR is negative. That means that patient had an infection and now antibodies has developed. IIT Delhi is also developing an antibody test and RT-PCR test. If somebody's antibody is positive and that is negative, that means she is now recovered. Antibody is negative and RT-PCR is positive. That means that it is an active phase of infection. If both are negative, then there are chances that that patient has not been infected. But you have to repeat ideally the test 1 week after the surgical procedure, because suppose on day 1 the surgery was done, maybe the patient was in window period and he develops the infection, and confirmatory is to do the test after 5 to 7 days. Now all said and done, recommendation is that for all emergency and semi-emergency procedures, as of now, is that you should go for RT-PCR.
Every patient, because those were coming for semi-emergency and emergency. Elective surgeries are not there. If suppose a surgery is emergent and your test cannot be, report takes 6 to 8 hours to come, at 9 hours at times. So presume that patient has COVID positive and take due precautions. Due precautions mean operate it in a COVID OT and wear the full protective equipment gear. You cannot rely only on the history of cough, cold and fever. There can be asymptomatic carriers also. Also, yes, you have to be more careful. Patients who are more than 60 years of age, patients with comorbidities, and patients who are living in hotspots, containment areas where the endemic is more. So these are my statements based on the official guidelines. Right. So the consensus is, when our surgeon insists that we want to do this, say, I want to do lab chole or something, we can plan out tomorrow. We would insist to get the COVID test done, because it is not in benefit of the anesthetists only, for everyone working in the hospital, right from sweeper and nursing staff and operation theatre staff. Is that right? It is better to make it very clear that this patient is COVID negative.
Dr. Diwan, I request everybody to make the COVID testing not a pre-anesthetic workup, but please talk it as a pre-procedure or pre-operative workup like HIV, HCV and HBS.
Yeah.
Surgeons should be made to understand. Please use 2 words. I request you, please use 2 to 3 statements in front of surgeons. COVID-19 has made us to be very, very flexible. What was wrong yesterday is right today. What was right today is wrong today. So be flexible. COVID-19 testing is a pre-procedure or pre-operative testing. Also, anesthesiologists use the word AGMP and enhanced AGMP. Aerosol generating medical procedures and enhanced aerosol generating medical procedures. Anesthesiologists, ENT, dental, they are working close to patient's mouth. So their risk of exposure is more because of the aerosolization of the viruses. But that does not mean the people who are standing in the OT, may it be surgeon, nurse, bearer, sweeper, they all are exposed.
Vulnerable. They all are vulnerable.
Now, a second word about laparoscopic procedures. Today we are coming, I am happy to share with you, today we are coming up with ISA position statement and advisory 3 on COVID OT. It will be released tonight as a IJ article also. In that also we have published laparoscopic procedures, the procedures which involve use of electrical equipment, electrocautery and insufflation of the abdomen. At the time of desufflation, the surgical plume is rich and is more than the harm of during tracheal intubation, the risk of aerosolization. The surgical plume is laden with debris, viruses. So, laparoscopic surgery, there are the 3 societies of surgical gastroenterology. 2 have said that better to wait, or if you cannot wait, go for an open surgery. One society of gastroenterology, surgical gastroenterology, has said that you can go ahead but apply HEPA filter on the suction catheter. Once you are deflating it, do it very gradually. near the port, apply a suction catheter, and that suction catheter should have a filter which includes a viral filter. So laparoscopic surgery is more harmful for
Than
surgeons
conventional.
than anesthesiologists.
That's a great point. We need to stress upon, we have to put our foot down, and in their benefit and every staff member's benefit, we need to be taking care of all these things. So that's the reason we are worried that we should not be doing. If we can delay the surgery, it is better to delay in this time. Then Naveen, thank you so much for bringing out that point, as well as changing the terminology. Not pre-anesthetic, it's the pre-procedural
Procedural.
testing. So that's a great point you raised. Now we come to the techniques. Say, example, a surgery is must, and the surgery can be done either with regional or general anesthesia. So, Rushi, suppose a surgery can be done with both. What will be your choice?
So, in the outbreak of pandemic of COVID, see, the anesthesia practice is generally based on the minimizing the aerosolized generating procedures. We should always try to minimize this kind of procedures, say about intubation, extubation, suctioning of mouth, so which will reduce the exposure of the patient's respiratory secretions to anesthesiologists, other healthcare worker, and all that. So, in scenario, if possible, always choose a regional anesthesia against the general anesthesia, which is highly aerosolized generating procedure, as Dr. Naveen sir said. Second thing, you have a very nowadays you have asymptomatic cases also. So that in that scenario, even though you have a COVID negative test or anything, but there is still chances of exposure. So if possible, always try to go for a regional anesthesia. Obviously, we have a failed regional anesthesia of toxicity kind of scenario happens, but the chances of these things in a percentage wise are very less in experienced anesthesiologists, and things are like that.
Agreed.
So I think whenever the possible to do in regional, always go for a regional anesthesia in my point of view.
I agree. So we would prefer regional anesthesia. We'll talk about the PPE for the patient, what patient will be, how will be covered in N95 later on when we talk about PPE. But as far as procedure is concerned, there is a less AGMP if you do regional anesthesia. Everybody agrees with that, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Now we are coming to a very important area of PPE. Manisha, you want to make comment on this, regional and general?
Yes, sir. I also agree with regional anesthesia. Aerosolization is less. And you are talking about the local anesthetic toxicity cases, but we have intralepic in hand. So we can prevent the morbidity and mortality.
Agreed. But right now we are talking about the patients who have been screened primarily, they are non-COVID and they are undergoing the private practice with semi-emergencies or emergencies. We are talking about these patients.
Yes.
There are very remote chances, sometimes spinal fails or regional fails. Then there is a different protocol. Then we may be taking risk and we may be taking consent primarily and taking risk also.
Yes.
But primarily we'll select regional anesthesia.
Yes.
Everybody agrees with that. Right. Thank you so much, Manisha. Now we are coming to an important area of PPE, personal protection equipments. So there's so many things are available. Rushi, are you going to discuss this?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So we have different types of masks, 3-layered or 3-ply mask and N95, N99 and various other devices with so-called N95 masks and all.
I will.
So please elaborate something
So
about.
I will briefly elaborate in the area of these contaminated to preventing the contamination diseases which are generating by airborne or particulate or somewhere.
Rushi, just hold on. Let me welcome Dr. Badresh Shah, Secretary Gujarat State Bank. Naveen, your body is here.
Yes.
Good evening, Dr. Badresh. How are you?
Yes, sir. Welcome, sir.
So, this beard is a gift of COVID?
Yes, sir. First of all, congratulations to all and thanks to you that you have for your presence, and thanks to all faculties and SSB for conducting such a nice webinar. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So I will continue that.
Thank you so much. Continue.
I would continue with these are the equipments which are known as air purifying respirators. It is mainly of three types. What we are talking about, the mask, these are called as a filtering face piece respirators, which are they have categories like filtering face mask respirator 1, 2, and 3, which you can say N95, N99, and all that. There are elastometric reusable respirators, which have a full face and half face respirators, which can be reused, and it provides an effective seal. And it has a replaceable cartridge and filters, which have a long half-life than these N95 and all that. So in an era of scarcity of these disposable respirators, you can go with this kind of respirators if available to you. And other things are powered air purifying respirators, which is called as PAPR, which is highly recommended for those who are working in a high aerosolization generating procedures, like say ICU duty staffs, those who are continuously working in ICU for more than 4-5 hours, more than 6 hours, those who are a team member of intubating team in COVID ICUs, those who are like in endemic eras, say about 4-5 intubation in a 4-5 hours, you may get that kind of situation. In that kind of situation, these kind of respirators are very beneficial for anesthesiologists as well as the other healthcare worker. Other thing are like all full-blown PPE kit which cover head to toe, which has a shoe cover as well as a long sleeve, gloves, goggles, and all that, and face shield. If you don't have this kind of high-end respirators, face shield is must whenever you are facing the high aerosolization procedures like intubation, extubation, suctioning, and all that.
Rushi, just hold on. Now they have raised the issue of face shield. I'm extremely on behalf of ISA Gujarat State Branch. We are thankful to ISA National Headquarters Naveen for providing that grant, and we have been able to provide this wonderful face shield to every ISA member in Gujarat. Thank you so much for providing the help.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
We must thank Naveen for initiating this.
No. Please don't thank me. And this is the duty of ISA National to support the members and the branches. And we are just doing our job. It is the team ISA.
Yeah, but it's a great gesture on behalf of ISA team. I must say.
Team ISA, sir. Team ISA is working, sir.
Correct. And here also Badresh and everyone has worked very hard to distribute it. Get the right person item with us. Yeah, Rushi, go ahead.
Yeah, so apart from mask, as I told, this full-blown PPE kit and eye protection, face protection, and mouth protection, which should be there for all persons, like say anesthesiologist, your OT staff, or your healthcare worker. So for doing any procedure, any surgical procedure or any intervention, you should be fully done with this kind of PPEs in suspected or positive COVID, or as well as in asymptomatic patients. But now the question comes, okay, what are the rationale of this kind of PPE equipment? Say in each and every case you have to wear. The simple answer is yes right now.
Yes.
There is no alternative right now. But in case of scarcity of this kind of thing, you have to think about the disinfection as well as reuse of this kind of equipment. So there are in Western world there are guidelines to reuse of these equipments. Even we have ICMR guidelines for use of this N95 mask and all that. So sterilization procedure, disinfection procedures, whenever possible, use the reusable PPEs, which can be beneficial and which can be interchangeable. See, if you use a reusable elastometric respirator or PAPR, it can be used by different individuals. And there would be effectively it is very handy. They say every duty change person you can have some 5 or 6 gear. So whenever the change of the duty happens, the ICU person or healthcare worker, they can interchange it with the proper disinfection and proper sterilization. So in future we should think about this kind of equipments whenever possible. But right now there is no alternative. You should be geared up with all full blown PPE equipments.
Rishi, great.
What do Rajesh say?
Like in AIMS guidelines gave that the N95 you can reuse, use 5 masks, keep storing them in a
Sir, I can elaborate. There are multiple ways to disinfect. Say 72 hours air dry in sunlight, it will disinfect the virus. Say you can say the hydrogen peroxide vapor, which maintain the integrity of N95 mask and disinfect the virus. Say ammonium nitrate vaporization and all that. You can do simple thing. You can just add hydrogen peroxide to the nebulizer mask, and you easily disinfect with the fumes if you have in a peripheral setup. Nowadays they recommended hydrogen peroxide fumigations in operation theater. You can put your PPE kit in the operation theater and just disinfect all of them at a single set. Yes. So these are the methods which easily available, and in scarcity of these all geared up equipments, you can reutilize. That now, if the Western world are in that area, okay, they have to reuse this kind of equipments. We may think about reusing of this kind of equipments, and we develop that kind of strategy in future.
Right. So the one consensus is in the present scenario for our city, probably N95 is the best solution as for the mask, right?
Yes, sir. But for any mask or for any PPE equipments, the only answer is proper fitting. Proper fitting of any PPE equipment. See, we are just say put the N95 mask if it is not properly sealed. Yes. So there is no. I think you are not getting 100% surety that you are going to. So every people is known to educate how to properly fit these N95 masks. They recommended not to have a beard, not to have.
Correct. I was coming to that point.
Yes.
To male gender,
yes,
has to remove the beard before. Because
yes. So that only the number of N95 give you a false security. The thing is this: it's a proper sealing of every mask or every PPE equipment.
Correct.
So these are the things which you should taken care of during the donning of the PPEs.
Right. Now, there are a couple of questions I still have about the PPE kit. Rushil, if you continue. First is, say you want to give spinal anesthesia and you need to scrub. I'm coming to gloves again later on. But how will you scrub? You have the kit before or?
Sir, I think for a spinal anesthesia, right now, hand wash is the first thing. So whenever you are doing any procedure, just go for a hand wash. First
is hand wash.
First is a hand wash. First is hand wash. Then make alcohol sterilization of your head.
Second step done.
Do donning of PPE. Donning of PPE with full head cover and all that. And then simply dry scrub again with the sterile gloves wearing over. And then again you just wear a gown and just go for your regional procedures.
Correct. Agreed. You all agree with that? The method of scrubbing?
Yes, sir.
Everybody agreed with that? Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Now, second question comes, you are doing a general anesthesia. You are a fully protected kit. Are you able to listen to me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Now, tell me about the gloves. You already have the gloves on when you start breaking IV lines and instead the IV.
Sir, what I will set a protocol. I make hydrogen sodium hypochlorite solution or hydrogen peroxide solution standby before performing the general anesthesia procedures. So if say about once you start doing we all know the protocol which is established worldwide, how to do the general anesthesia to minimize the viral load during induction, extubation, like rapid sequence induction, use the proper relaxation and deeper plane of anesthesia, use the filters before pre-oxygenation with the patient, with the surgical mask, with the nasal cannula, no open air pre-oxygenation, proper fitting of the mask and all that. But once you intubate the patient, you should always wear a 2 pair of gloves in case of the general anesthesia. Once you do for intubation, just put your the laryngoscope blade or video laryngoscope blade inside the first pair of gloves. I generally put these all blades in either hydrogen peroxide solution or either sodium hypochlorite solution, which is easily you can make it. Even hot water with simple detergent, even hot water with simple detergent bucket will work for serve this purpose to prevent the contamination with the other things. So if you go for a general anesthesia, this is small things. Prepare the hypochlorite and hydrogen peroxide solution standby. Put your every airway manipulating equipment inside that with the single use. And once you do the procedure, once you started the anesthesia, proper connection and all that, proper filter making proper filter adaptations and all that, you just remove that first pair of gloves immediately after intubation and just proceed with the gloves again. Even they said that if you contaminate another pair of gloves, you should immediately go for changing that pair of the gloves. All.
So that was a good guidelines for the gloves, because I have seen it's a false sense of security. People have a one pair of gloves, they keep it on, they touch the monitors, they touch the anesthesia workstation, they touch everywhere, even they touch their mobile phones in between, they touch the pen, they write the papers. So one gloves of one pair is always false sense of security, and that is not only for COVID, that is true for any patient. Any patient suspected anything. When you work with the gloves, this is a false sense of security. I have been telling our colleagues and the staff that this is not correct. You should have, when you do a procedure, remove the gloves, or have 2 pairs of gloves, remove the first one. You rightly said this, and in between take the sanitizer over the gloves also.
Yes.
So that was a very good discussion. Now, only
Dr. Ivan, can I add on here something?
Yeah, I'm coming to you. I'm coming to Naveen.
You should cover all the monitors, all the sheets,
Plastic.
all the cables, all the mobile phones with transparent plastic sheets, which should be changed after every COVID positive or COVID suspected positive surgery.
Correct. Yeah. So anyway, I was coming to you. Before that, I have a question to Rushi. In a minor procedure, say DNC or something is there, would you do the same precautions?
Sir, I would like to differentiate the procedure in 2 parts. The procedure which required airway manipulation and the procedure which may not require a airway manipulation in minor cases. Say around DNC and all that, you can easily do with the spontaneous respiration on. You can easily do with these total intravenous anesthesia, which is there where you protect the patient's airway. We have an agent which simultaneously gives the anesthesia as well as the protects airway. We have such kind of agent like ketamine, and so I am recommended a liberal use of ketamine instead of opioids and benzodiazepines, which reduce the respiratory, which cause a respiratory depression and invoke you to act for airway manipulation. You just go, if you give a propofol or say thiopentol and that kind of agent, you may get a respiratory depression and you immediately
Correct.
Open circuit and just try to do that.
Correct. Rishi, we are a little bit, we need to detail fast. Only one question is, regional anesthesia you are doing, would you put COVID, N95 mask over the patient also? Suspected case, emergency patient?
Sir, it is recommended that only surgical mask to the patient will, if it is a confirmed positive case.
No, it's a different. No, it's not your private practice patient.
But no,
emergency patient.
It's a surgical mask that will that is minimum requirement for the covering the patients to whenever you are shifting the ward.
Okay. Siddharth and Manisha Ben, any short comment on the PPE? Then I'll get back to Naveen.
PP, I don't think anything is remaining. I think Dr. Rushi has already mentioned each and every parts.
Yes.
Manisha, you agree with that?
Yes.
Dr. Naveen, your final comments on the PPE and carrying of the equipments and always, I was telling you, your right point, Naveen, you said. Naveen, unmute yourself. Dr. Naveen, please unmute yourself. Dr. Naveen, please unmute yourself. Rushil, see that Dr. Naveen is unmuted. Yeah, thank you so much. No, again, yeah. So I was asking about your final comments on PPE, what the guidelines suggest and what you recommend.
See, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare clear-cut says that any PPE, the fabric, if it meets ISO 22612, if that is there, it is good enough. And the other thing is about the synthetic blood penetration resistance test, which is this ISO 16603. So the fabric and the gown which has been done there, they should be considered as a benchmark, and it should be very, very clearful that yes, it has to be resistant to blood and blood products, the fabric as well as the gown. And the two standards are ISO 16603 and ISO 22612. Now, there are so many PPEs available in the market, which one to choose? You cannot, with your naked eyes, tell that this is the appropriate PPE. You, as a clinician, can test only by pouring a cup of tea, keeping it there for 2 to 3 minutes, and just seeing whether the under surface becomes wet or not. Rest, you have to go and believe and ask for the certification of the tested laboratory. Don't only check the fabric, kapda or uski silai. The stitching is also important. The under surface or the inner cover of the shields or the stitching should also be taped. 1. 2 is such specifications may not be available, but it is by using spurious PPEs, you are risking yourself and going into a false sense of security. PPE does not see personal protective equipment, or it includes everything. One is the kit or the whole gear, which includes the coverall gown, including inbuilt shoe cover or an add-on shoe cover. Then you have got an N95 mask, and then eyeglasses, and then eyeglasses or visor, including head and 2 pairs of gloves and one biomedical wristband. As far as N95 mask is there are so much spurious things going on here. Please look for certified NIOSH, which is American, or EN, European FFP2. Having PPE and having an N95 mask or eye shield or visor is one thing, but you have to stay safe to wear it nicely. I can tell you on my own experience, I got no harm in confessing in front of you. It took me 3 to 4 times to wear everything properly. So practice, do mock drills. You can commit mistakes during donning the PPE. पहनते वक्त गलती कर सकते हो. But during doffing, while you are taking off, you cannot do any mistake because you are then touching your outer surfaces infected. So just be good, and I can tell you it takes 15 to 20 minutes in donning and another 20 to 25 minutes in doffing. Doffing, you have to hand sanitize at each and every moment. About the equipments in the OT, ensure that they are the minimum equipments in the OT, whichever are required. Ensure they are disposable one, so that use and throw types. Ensure that the decontamination of the OT is done properly. You have to teach your staff nurse to teach the bearers and the sweepers to do it properly. This is our duty to teach our junior staff for proper sterilization and decontamination of the OTs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naveen. 2 points I like. The proper technique for removing the kit, it takes 10-15 minutes, and you really need to practice it well, because there's more dangerous than wearing it. I understand the very practical point. And the second point you told was that everybody must be very careful, and this applies for every time, not even the COVID time, is covering your mobile, covering the monitors, covering your patient. Wherever you are touching some plastic cover, so that, and finally when you finish, to throw away all those things. So these two very valid points, Naveen, you said. Thank you so much. Manisha Ben, I will get back to you. You are doing a lot of COVID patients emergencies, and particularly obstetrics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Divan, can I, Divan?
Yeah, Naveen, tell me.
There are only 10 participants in this webinar.
No. There's a link going on. To all
the link.
They are not able to talk. Only participants are the faculties.
Okay.
They are saying that Bhadresh.
And the link is sir different for the participants and the faculty, sir. So the server through they are able to see, but we won't be. But we'll let you know, sir, how many participants are there.
No,
Thank you.
that's 450, 60. Yeah. It's 400. Or more than that, probably. We have sent it to almost 300 people in Ahmedabad. Or 400 people.
Please let the academics go on. Let the academics go on, please.
Yeah. So, Manisha Ben, can you tell us about your experience with the cesarean sections you have carried out in last week?
Yes, sir. We are conducting the cesarean section under regional anesthesia as far as possible. We have conducted all cesarean section under regional anesthesia, and testing of baby is also carried out at 24 hours apart, 2 times up to the for 48 hours. Babies have also testing with nasopharyngeal and rectal swabbing is done, and RT-PCR is done. And breastfeeding of the by the mother is allowed according to the WHO guidelines. Whether the patient mother is asymptomatic and baby is also asymptomatic, then the baby will be kept with the mother. And when baby is having some problem and needs the NICU admission, then extracted breastfeed is taken from mother and given to the baby. And yesterday we have also carried out emergency hysterotomy. A patient has bleeding PV and 6 months amenorrhea. Baby alive is born, and it is of 1 kg body weight. We have intubated that baby, and baby has a problem of surfactant. The pediatric our pediatric department carries the whole care of the baby according to the WHO.
Yeah, so you take all the precautions with full kit, and you do, because you are a COVID patient. So my second question was, how do you isolate the baby? You have already answered it now. So that was great, because there is a mother is COVID positive and the baby is that time not. It's very important that you keep the baby away, because the most vulnerable individual. So that's a good answer you gave before I actually asked the question. Thank you, Manisha. Now coming to anything we want to add, Manisha, on this?
No, sir.
No, thank you. Ridesh, I know you have been sidetracked for some time because Rishi took over so many things. Let me have an important role to be assigned to you. Ridesh, be on the main screen.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now we want to discuss about, we are planning a surgery. Day will come, maybe 2nd May, maybe 16th May, maybe 1st June. We start doing elective procedure also. Right now we are doing only emergencies, but we need to discuss now about the OT guidelines and what kind of OT we need to have, the negative pressure, and what kind of air conditioner, air changes in between, re-sterilization time in between 2 surgeries. Those things we want to discuss. So if you have some presentation or something, you can go ahead, or you can discuss out.
Sir, I can discuss out. I don't have a presentation right now. But OT guidelines start with the first triage of the patient before admission by the respected consultants. Then pre-operatively COVID test, which is already told by Dr. Naveen said that it is nowadays
we go to the OT only now, OT guidelines.
Okay. Then Sir, first of all, establish the protocol of the hand hygiene and personal protective equipment teaching towards the staff and towards the particularly surgeon also. Mainly because the surgeons are our heroes, and the heroes think that they can do anything and nothing going to happen to them and their staff also. So we have to teach to the primary consultant and the staff also, particularly the small private clinics. The education and the training is very important. Then define the donning and doffing area of the PPE in a particular operation theatre. Make minimum number of the OT staff inside the operation theatre. Protocols of the regional anesthesia have already been described by the Dr. Rushi and other consultants. Then protocols of the general anesthesia is a check anesthesia machines and the monitors before the patient arrives in the operation theatre. Protect anesthesia machine is very necessary with filter, because most important is the internal sterilization of the anesthesia machine, which is not possible by us or by the hospital. For that, manufacturer can only do that, and it may take up to 7 to 10 days if the machine has been infected afterward. Use only one circuit for the induction and the maintenance. We are used to with the primary induction with the Bain circuit, and then we put the patient on the closed circuit. It should not be like that. Use only closed circuit if you want to use. Same applied for the mask. You check the fitting of the mask, and that mask has to be chosen, because it may be thrown away or it may be re-sterilized. So don't use much of the equipment, as Dr. Naveen sir has said, inside the operation theatre. Video laryngoscope, if available, then keep ready. It is a preferable mode of intubation in suspected COVID patient or asymptomatic COVID patient. Keep everything available before induction so that we can minimize in and out from the operation theatre, so that the other healthcare person which are involved in the operation theatre are not exposed. Define role of the OT staff. Emergency drug should be keep inside the operation theatre depending upon the condition of the patient. Receive patient in the operation theatre with the triple layer mask. It is must, and make sure that it covers the nose and the mouth. Pre-oxygenation with 100% oxygen if the general anesthesia is planned for 5 minutes. Rapid sequence induction. No IPPV. Use of the scoline or the rocuronium, which are ultra short acting muscle relaxant. Avoid use of the atracurium or the vecuronium, because we have to give IPPV for 2 to 3 minutes. After intubation, clamp the endotracheal tube and attach the filter with the circuit. One filter is at the patient end and the other filter will be at the expiratory limb.
One filter at the patient's end, other at the expiratory limb.
Expiratory limb of the closed circuit.
Yes.
Yes, sir. After intubation, laryngoscope blade should be sheathed with the outer gloves, which you have wear 2 gloses. So one glove has to be covered. One has gloves to be removed, and the laryngoscope blade should be covered. Or as the Dr. Rushi has said, we can make the sodium hypochlorite solution keep ready and put the laryngoscope blade inside it directly after intubation, so that that blade doesn't come in contact with the anesthesia machine or the monitor or the workstation or any healthcare worker. Attach epidural filter for gas monitoring if applicable, because gas monitoring system may also be infected if the patient is COVID positive. Use closed suction if possible, which is available in every ICU. We can also use inside the operation theatre. We may apply plain drape before extubation over the patient. This plain drape is meant for that expiratory, when the patient come out of the anesthesia and the spontaneous respiration is there. If the plain drape, we may cover the patient with the plain drape so that the expiration doesn't affect the atmosphere of the operation theatre and we are less exposed to the patient. Avoid coughing at the extubation, which is most important. And we may not sometimes avoid coughing, but some drugs are available, like we can use at the extubation Xylocard or sometimes low dose dexmedetomidine, so that the patient can tolerate the tube well and it doesn't cough. Patient will have less coughing, so that the aerosol generation will be less. After extubation, give oxygen by mask with circuit underneath the plain drape. Your hands are underneath the plain drape and your face is away from the patient. Supplemental oxygen, if needed, should be given by the non-rebreathing oxygen mask. Avoid oxygen by the nasal cannula or the oxygen mask, particularly high flow oxygen, because it also increases the arousals. Avoid nebulization inside the operation theater. If at all required, you can use the meter dose inhaler. Shift the patient to the ICU or the ward. If the patient is to be shifted to the ICU with endotracheal tube, then before detaching the patient from the closed circuit, clamp the endotracheal tube. Attach the Mapleson D circuit, that is Bain circuit, with the filter. Unclamp the endotracheal tube and shift the patient to the ICU with endotracheal tube and give good sedation and the analgesia to avoid coughing. Always use good dose of the antiemetics to avoid post-operative nausea, vomiting. Because if the patient is vomiting out, it is also again a high aerosol generating effect. So have a good dose of the antiemetic in every surgery. Before starting of the induction, you may stop the air conditioner. After induction or the intubation, you may again start the AC. After extubation, all the airway circuit, mask, airway equipment should be disposed or re-sterilize it according to the institutional protocols. After all the things has been happened, then comes the doping. So avoid self-contamination, as the Dr. Naveen sir said. It should take almost 15 to 20 minutes, and every step of the doping includes the hand hygiene. Keep minimum 1 to 1.5 hours between the two consecutive OT in the same operation theater, and sterilize deep cleaning the OT with either vapor fumigation or hydrogen peroxide fumigation of the operation theater, and minimum 1 to 1.5 hours should be there. And the negative pressure operation theater. The negative pressure operation theater is ideal, but its making of the negative operation theater is somewhat tricky, and it is to be done by the hospitals with the help of the biomedical engineer. What do you mean by the negative pressure operation theater is that negative pressure is generated and maintained by the ventilation system that removes more air from the operation theater in the amount that air enter in the operation theater. Means when the amount of the air entering in the operation theater is less than the amount of the air which leaves the operation theater. We can do with this negative pressure operation theater with simple exhaust fan, but it is also a debatable issue. Ultimately, negative pressure operation theater is actually just one big vacuum.
Okay. Let me interrupt you a little bit. I have some questions for you, but I'll come to negative pressure theater to Naveen. Naveen, can you elaborate briefly? Naveen, can you? Yeah, please.
Very nicely covered about aspects of OT. I like to add on certain points. See, the good thing COVID has taught us is that we are now discussing about the setting up of the air conditioning. Throughout in our MD career, we never thought of how the central air conditioning is going to act. Basic thing is that there are two things you have to remember. There is one which is putting the air in and one which is taking it out. So there are two types of pressure. One with which the air is pushed into the OT, and from the collecting duct, it is the speed with which it is, the pressure with which it is sucked back. That air then goes to the air handling unit, where it gets filtered and is recirculated. So this is if the pressure of exhaust or the air being drawn out is more, that converts a particular area, whether it is OT or ICU or room, into a negatively pressurized one. If the pressure of air entering into a room or OT and leaving is same, it is known as neutrally pressurized. And if the air entry is more, which is common in majority of the operation theater, that air entering is more and return is less, these OTs are positively pressurized. So these positively pressurized were made initially because so as to keep that no external air enters the OT and the air particles are moving out of the OT if at all. But now in COVID-19, we have to remember that the OT area is highly infected. there should be no air leak outside of this virus going into the other parts of the building of the hospital. And there should be minimum load of the virus inside that room also. So there are two things important to remember. In majority of the places, the centrally air conditioning wherever there is connected to other OTs also and to other areas on that particular floor, OTs and certain wards on that particular floor. So that is why the dictum has come that keep your central air conditioning off until unless it is serving to the dedicated OT, which is very, very unlikely. Number one. So central air conditioning is off. Now, second thing is working with PPE on. In March, in our area, there were rainfalls and weather was quite comfortable. But still, after wearing PPE, with our experience of working in ICU for around after 2 to 3 hours, you used to get very, very thirsty. You were sweating a lot. Because of rainfall, there was some humidity also. You cannot scratch your nose, you cannot scratch your back, nothing. And you're just sweating and you're uncomfortable. And at times, we had to change our PPEs after 3 to 4 hours. Now, Ministry of Central Public Work Developments had come up with the iShare guidelines. It is the Institute of Air Conditioning Bodies. They have got clear-cut guidelines have been released. I'll not go into the multiple ones, but 3 statements I'll like to make. One,
Naveen, you are lost. We can't hear you. Is your connection okay, Naveen?
now am I audible? Now am I audible?
Yes, better.
But see, I'd asked who has given me the link to give access to my laptop also because the other webinar is over now. So if you can give access to my laptop, to learn.
We have already mailed you. They already mailed you.
Now they're giving me the connection. So am I audible now?
Yeah, perfect.
Yes, sir.
So okay. I'll just
change to laptop.
Yeah, I'm changing to laptop.
Yeah. In between, before Naveen joins back, let me ask Siddharth, Ridesh.
Yes, sir.
What is your choice of circuit? You said use only one circuit, but there are many people who are using Bain circuit only. Would you recommend Bain circuit?
Ideally, sir, closed circuit should be used because the closed circuit, with closed circuit only we can deliver the low flow anesthesia.
Correct. That's what I'm telling you. We want the minimum load coming out from the circuit.
Yes, sir. But if you are using Bain circuit, then the flow rate should be not less than 6 liter, right? 6 to 8 liters.
Correct. So low flow you recommend. That's
yes.
My next question was.
Can I continue?
Yeah, please.
Am I audible now?
Yes,
sir. Yes.
So the issue was about the air conditioning. So central air conditioning goes off. Next best possible measure is that go for room air conditioners. They are allowed, ideally, preferably 2 tons of AC, 2 split ACs are good enough to make the room comfortable and make your working comfortable in the OT or ICU. Number 1. Number 2, you need to have 2 to 3 exhaust fans also in that particular room, so as to draw out the air and dilute the virus load into in the OT. Third, keeps the slight vent of AC on, and you need to have a fresh inflow of air through HEPA filter. So 3 modifications have to be done. 1, you have to install the room air conditioner, split type, 2 ton, 2 ACs. Number 2, exhaust, which will take out the viruses, take out the OT air and ensure 12 air cycles per hour. Third, drawing in of air, fresh air flows in. You have to ensure that there is air flow in through HEPA filter. so that the sterility of the OT is not much compromised. With exhaust fan in, some sterility is compromised and there is noise pollution also. So at the same time, those who are working in bigger institutes, they should ensure they start planning with their air conditioning unit and air handling units to have OTs. Now we should remember that we're going to live in a COVID era. So every hospital needs to have a COVID zone and non-COVID zone. There may be patients who have to be kept in isolation ward, labor ward, OTs, SDUs and ICUs. So that planning as anesthesiologist, we have to be very, very proactive. Other points I like to have is about the OTs is the number of OTs. Ideally, there should be at least 2 OTs, one reserved for obstetrical one and other for all other surgical specialties, including pediatric surgeries. And there should be clear-cut red zones and green zones. Separate entry, separate exit. There should not be any mixing of the healthcare workers. The patient is coming from a particular corridor. You are also coming from a particular corridor. Patient is leaving from another corridor. And after doffing, you are going from a sterile zone. These all things you have to remember. At present, there are only 2 corridors, one for the patient and one for the doctor. So your exit after doffing should be from that area, which is totally green zone. I have talked about air conditioning, and other points which are more important are while transporting the patient, ensure that he is totally covered with a plastic sheet when he is being wheeled in from ward to the OT, and similarly when he is wheeled back also. The plastic, if at all you want, it is better to apply N95 mask or at least a surgical mask on the patient while transport. You can give oxygen therapy over the mask. We have done it practically. And another important point is about scavenging. See, we have already done many modifications. We have applied 3 HME filters. One on the tracheal tube, one on between the tracheal tube and an inspiratory limb, and one on the expiratory limb. We are using low flow, no Bain circuit, closed circuit only, low flow, maybe as low as 1 liter or 2 liters, and with end-tidal carbon dioxide and agent gas monitoring. Still, active scavenging is not available in majority of the hospitals. So, in the scavenging port, it is suggested that you apply a corrugated tubing and then dip that corrugating tubing into a bucket containing 1% hypochlorite solution, so that the leakage of virus from the patient is minimal.
Naveen, your voice is lost. Naveen, your voice is gone. Other people, please mute. Riddesh, in between, Riddesh, please unmute. You suggested 2 filters. Naveen says 3 filters, expiratory as well as the patient's end.
Sir, minimum 2 filters should be there.
Correct. Agree.
One at the patient end.
And I suggest 4th, I was coming to you for extubation over the mask, where you keep another 4th filter over the mask. Do you recommend that? You extubate and there's a mask there, so no portion is open while you take out the tube.
Yes, sir, we can use that. But minimum 2 filters should be there. And the 3 filters is very good. Inspiratory limb, expiratory limb, and towards the patient side.
Naveen,
but the 2 filters are minimum.
Correct. Naveen, your voice. Naveen, we have lost your voice. Okay. By the time I continue with Riddesh,
yes.
Will you suppose a procedure like something can be done with LMA? Would you recommend LMA or statewide endotracheal tube?
No, sir. In the pandemic of the COVID, we should avoid the supraglottic airway device because there will be leak. So
More
better
aerosol.
is to use the endotracheal tube because it will generate the aerosols and you can get infected.
Okay. Is Naveen, are you? Just Naveen, can you try to speak? You are starting on the mobile? Okay, try out. No problem. Mobile karo Naveen. I'll call you on mobile.
Am I audible now?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
perfect.
So sorry for this technical glitch, and that led to my interruption of flow also. So I was on scavenging, and that I have taken care of that.
By
And
emerging in the hypocrite solution.
you should ensure that minimum number of personnel are there inside the OT, as less as possible, because we do not want to expose majority of the patients into such OTs. And the neonatal resuscitation can be done immediately as the baby is delivered. You can take out the patient and you can do it outside in the corridor or in the second OT if it is available. The other thing which we have recognized while working in is that with exhaust fan on, with window AC on, with PPE on, there are issues with communication. So practice some sign language also, where you can communicate with your surgical colleagues or your anesthesia technician. Some like one, if you say one, I need atropine. If you say two, I need methamphetamine. Like that, you have to be take care of that. And few administrative points are also there, which will come up. Suppose a surgical team decides that this is an emergency procedure which has to be done in a COVID positive patient. Then they will, it will be a decision which will be taken by the anesthesiologist, surgeon, involving patient and their attendants. But such a decision should never be challenged. The wisdom of the...
Naveen, we are actually losing time now. We have a couple of minutes only left out.
Okay, so I'll just...
I want you to conclude also quickly.
Yeah.
If suppose we break, you please do
I
it.
think I have covered majority of the points. One thing I like to say, my concluding remark is, please do a mock drill of donning and doffing, and please do a mock drill of a mock surgery. Fill in the patient, wear the PPE in a normal patient who is not COVID positive.
Correct.
To understand the practical problems.
Very, very important point.
Thank you very much.
Before we lose out the time, you please be on. Thank you so much. I must thank Naveen, especially sparing this much time in a very, very busy schedule. I remember during cricket time, I told him that if he 3-4 days he travels and he has to introduce himself when he goes home. Nowadays he's not traveling, but same thing, is equally occupied 18 hours a day. It's a great energy you have, Naveen. And thank you so much for helping so much for ISM. So before we lose out, I just wanted to thank you. And Hina is going to do the job. Few questions are left out about the prophylaxis to the anesthetists. Does it really use for hydroxyquinoline or something? Who is going to answer? Manisha, you're going to answer this? Any role of prophylaxis? Or Naveen will answer? Tell Naveen.
As of now, it is a big debate going on. But Ministry of Health and Family Welfare has given these guidelines that those healthcare workers who are directly involved in management of COVID positive or COVID suspect patients in isolation ward, in ICU, in OT, in SDU, they should take HCQ prophylaxis. But literature says that it is a very, very controversial thing, and there are no clear-cut evidence which show that HCQ prophylaxis is of any use. Even a registry has been formed. But all said and done, those who are actually working in COVID areas, including me, they had started taking HCQ prophylaxis in March. And we have taken the 400 milligram BD dose on day 1. And now we are taking 400 once in a week for 7th week. Now I am in my I have taken 4th week tablet last Saturday. So there is no point. Those who have continued, they should continue. They should continue. But yes, one piece of advice is that please get a baseline ECG done and see the QTC interval. If it is prolonged, then better avoid it.
Correct.
But that should not also give a false sense of security that you have taken HCQ. so nothing is going to happen. You have to take care of all the other protection strategies as they are in the guidelines.
Thank you, Naveen. That was a very important, very nice answer you have given. Let me introduce Dr. Sunil. Everybody knows him. I don't need to introduce him. I must thank him for the technical support for this webinar. He has organized everything, and over 100 people are listening to us. 200 people are right now on. And Naveen, we are very proud of you joining these 200 people in Ahmedabad and Gujarat. So it's a great pleasure, and I must thank you personally.
Congratulations, Dr. Sunil,
for technical support. And there are two questions arise in my mind. It's been extended. So if you people are still on, let me continue for a few questions. One is Manisha Ben, when he raised the point of hydroxyquinoline and QT interval and all. Manisha Ben, can you unmute yourself? Manisha Ben, yes. So you have a patients who have been treated by hydroxyquinoline as a therapeutic measure in large dose. I'm sure what Naveen said, that get the baseline ECG done, and there was no. But do you observe increase in QT? I mean, technical question. Have you seen QT interval being prolonged?
Yes, sir. We are doing ECG analysis once a day in a COVID patient. And first time the patient come, COVID positive patient come, if the ECG shows that QT interval is prolonged, I personally believe that we should not use cooling. Because of the prolonged QTC interval, there are abnormal ventricular repolarization and re-entry circuit formation. Patient may have a syncope and seizures and sudden cardiac arrest. So I prefer rocuronium in place of the scoline in patients who have taken SCQ. This is my personal view.
Okay. So your choice is rocuronium instead of dexamethasone.
Yes.
And any role of extra magnesium or serum potassium or something in this patient? Have you seen there are some electrolyte imbalances, and I've seen probably hypokalemia coming up.
There are the electrolyte disturbances, but we have not done this
studies on this
management yet now. But I prefer rocuronium because in 1 minute we can intubate, and for atracurium or vecuronium we have to wait for 3 minutes, and chances of aerolization is more.
Siddharth be on. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I want his experience also.
Sir, we are using succinylcholine in all COVID patients mostly, and in some patient we use atracurium. But my experience is that we do not get any bradycardia or cardiac arrest after scoline administration on the patient which are on hydroxychloroquine. Now the thing is, sir, because choline is very rapid acting, we are using this drug for intubation purposes. Yes, sir. And I do not found any morbidity or mortality.
Well, then I have a question for you.
Yes.
Difficult intubation. Have you come across what difficulties you face in a COVID patient who is really hypoxic, is PaO2 is 50, 60 or less than that, and you're losing time. And do you find any difficulty in intubation in a real COVID contaminated with a lot of viral load patient?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Actually, when the patient, when there is a normal airway, the difficulty is only because of the PPE varans are all safety devices. But when we get difficult airway, that is actually a problematic condition, because, sir, all the protection gear, they are actually causing problem. And if the patient is having difficult airway, then the box and the sheath and everything you have to put outside, and you have to intubate just like a normal case. So the difficult airway dealing in COVID patient is very dangerous, and here there is some definite some sort of role of supraglottic airway as a rescue device, but it's a real nightmare. I have faced one condition in which the airway is difficult and we are not getting in, but because of the two experienced person, we can intubate at third attempt. So this is what happening actually.
Many people have designed the hoods, the covering the patient hole, their holes and their people. You put your in the boxes.
Those are beneficial for normal airway, but when there is a difficult airway, specifically in ICU code, it is really a difficult one.
I understand.
Because see, I have to remove my face seal and then I have to intubate the COVID positive patient. So
Correct.
this is what happening. And those who are having specs, they need to wear goggles or face seal. Then the whatever the
Visibility is a problem.
from
There's a lot of
N95
discomfort.
Yes, fogging, sweating, discomfort, everything, and
Yeah.
the load of PPA. When we bend a little bit downwards, actually everything will mash up our all conditions. And in this scenario, if the airway is difficult, then the problem will be enhanced.
You know, the discomfort. I remember I was asked to talk on the inspiratory carbon dioxide concentration, and I read a paper also in Washington last year. I got a very good reference for the mine workers who have been provided similar masks. They are actually N95 and all were the industrial masks once upon a time.
Yes.
And they were measured after 1 hour, 2 or 3 hours, the breathing difficulty, their PaCO2, their respiratory rate and everything. And it was found that their arterial carbon dioxide was higher because there was some rebreathing coming up. That's why we need a very tightly fixed mask. Still, there is a lot of difficulty. But I understand the difficulty you are facing with the kit, with inadequate air condition, with the whole PPE kit and stress and hypoxic patient. I can imagine the stress you have dealing with these patients. It's hats off to the people of our fraternity who are working with the ICU with so much difficulties and stress.
Yes.
And always a fear of getting COVID. There's something tremendous.
And
I'm glad
so
that Sunil has extended some time. So I'll have some questions. Continue.
Okay. And so I recommend 2% technique for difficult airway management in COVID patients, because in OT we know we are more comfortable for intubation and all, but in ICU actually the problem will be enhanced. Problem is problem is going to be more when we are getting patient in ICU bed. ICU bed, the ambu bag mass ventilation and then intubation in a condition which is actually not planned. See, we are getting a patient which become alter in sensorium, and we have to intubate those patients in unplanned conditions. And these conditions are literally very dangerous to us and all the people who are nearby.
I understand. Technical question, Ridesh. I just missed out asking you, Ridesh, about you talked about the circuits, but you didn't talk about the soda lime, which every patient we have to throw away, and how you sterilize the circle absorber.
Sir,
miss out. I need to tell.
Sir, after applying the HMEF filter, viral filter to the inspiratory, expiratory, and the patient end, this filtration is approximately 99.95%. And make sure that they are having the filter, because sometimes what happens, it is only the humidifier and moisture. HME is only there. No viral filtration is there. So check that it is filter the virus also. And these filters actually filter the 99.95%. So there is no need of the sterilization of that circle absorber system should be sterilized, because many circle absorber system canisters are autoclavable. But soda lime you have to change every time. So that was the few things which was missed out when I wanted to ask you. Thank you so much for so much good information you have given to us, Rishi and you and Siddharth and mainly from Siddharth and
Naveen. Yeah, everyone, our team, Naveen, our team is, I hope you would appreciate they've done a wonderful job. And most of the things we have been able to cover, the practical issues, the fear we have, the concept we should understand. And today we may not do elective procedures. We are doing only emergencies. Not many people are doing emergencies. So they are transferred to the corporate hospitals where all the facilities are there. But they will come in a month, 15 days to 1 month time, we'll have to start working. We have to survive. All private practitioners, all private surgeons will have to start working. So probably these practical guidelines, which all of you have given, is going to be very useful to everyone. And especially Dr. Naveen, no words to thank you.
Sir, before conclusion, I would like to.
I'm coming to. I'm coming to you. Hina, I'm coming to you. And so the information you have shared is really, really wonderful. And with authenticity, you could convey everything which exactly we should be doing. I would like to take leave from this now. I'll invite Hina, Secretary, Ahmedabad City Branch. Please take over. Thank all the faculties. Thank especially Naveen. And thank Sunil for giving a technical support for everything. Dr. Hina. I must thank you first, inviting me to moderate this session.
No, sir. Sir, you are the pilot of our webinar, sir. I, Dr. Hina Chanwal, the ISA Ahmedabad Secretary, on behalf of all the ISA office bearers of Ahmedabad and the AAA members, especially the President, the Sunil Shah, and our GHB Secretary, Dr. Bhadresh Shah. Sir, we would like to thank the guest faculty and Honorary Secretary of ISA National, Dr. Naveen Malhotra, sir. Good evening, sir. Sir, we are heartily thankful for your presence and giving you the precious time and the energy as well, sir. Sir, there is no word for our the moderation for the session, Dr. Rasesh Diwan, sir. He has made this webinar wonderful by asking the questions and all that, and sir, our main frontline warriors, Dr. Siddharth Parmar, Dr. Manisha Kapdi, Dr. K.U. Seth, Dr. Riddesh Panchal, and Dr. Rushi Mishra. Sir, I would like to thank all our young doctors and the seniors for sharing the knowledge regarding the day-to-day practice and the difficulties we are facing mainly while treating the suspected or the proven COVID patients. So thanks again, everyone. And thank you, Naveen sir and Rasesh Diwan sir, for making the webinar wonderful. Thank you.
Bye everyone. Bye all the
Bye, sir. Thank you.
guests and all the namaskar. Namaskar.